So for this video, I'm going to talk about January 22nd for the Security Council. Here is the program of work for the Security Council for January. And on the 22nd, they are having a briefing in the morning. And the topic is threats to international peace and security. All right, let's give a quick background review of the United Nations Security Council. Here is Mr. Nicolas de Rivière, the permanent representative of France. He is the president of the Security Council for January. And we know from our system chart, the Security Council is one of the 6 principal organs of the United Nations. Here is the charter, and Article 7 indeed lists the Security Council as one of the principal organs. And Article 24, Security Council has the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, and all the members agree that in carrying out its duty under this responsibility, the Security Council acts on their behalf. And then the members of the UN agree to accept and carry out the decisions of the Security Council. So every member pretty much has to do what the Security Council resolves to do. And the Security Council can adopt its own rules, including the method of selecting its president. And then here's the action that the Security Council can take. Article 41, they can decide what measures not involving the use of armed force are to be employed. And then Article 42 does indeed give them power to take action by air, sea, or land forces as may be necessary to maintain or restore international peace and security. Then Article 51 says also that notwithstanding every country, every member has the right to collect individual or collective self-defense. And we'll move over to the rules of procedure for the Security Council. The president of the Security Council shall be held in turn by the members of the Security Council in the English alphabetical order of their names. Each president shall hold office for 1 month. So here's Mr. de Rivière. He is the it's now time for France to hold the presidency. And let's go quickly to the current members. There are 15 members, and that's in the charter itself. Security Council. It shall consist of 15 members. And here are those 15. The 15 members are the 5 permanent, and that's also in the charter here. The Republic of China, France, Union of Socialist Republics, UK and US are the permanent members. Of course, this government does not exist anymore, nor does this one. But they have not changed the charter yet. But it's understood that this is now the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation. So the current members, we have Algeria. These are the non-permanent members. These are the ones voted for 2-year terms by the General Assembly. Algeria, Ecuador, Guyana, Japan, Malta, Mozambique, Republic of Korea, Sierra Leone, Slovenia, and Switzerland. So we have some geographic distribution. We have some in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. And so that's the background of the Security Council. All right, let's look at this document, which is titled Note by the President of the Security Council. It was issued in 2017. And this is like a manual, a guide on how to conduct the meetings. And in fact, this document was created to enhance the efficiency and transparency of the council's work. And they discuss here briefings. It is here a type of public meeting. We also have a function and function of a public meeting, the presence and participation, and then here the type in a briefing, you actually have a briefing that is conducted, and council members may then deliver statements following the briefings. And then so those statements by the members after the briefing, this manual here says that that the members and non-members shall deliver their statements in 5 minutes or less. And then a little bit more about briefings here. A briefer is to limit their initial remarks to 15 minutes unless otherwise decided by the council. Okay, now we'll watch some clips from the actual meeting itself. It's the 9,533rd meeting of the Security Council. The topic is threats to international peace and security. And more specifically, it's in regards to weapons transfers in the current war between Russia and Ukraine.
The 9,533rd meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is threats to international peace and security. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Ukraine to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Mr. Adedeji Ebo, Deputy to the High Representative of the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Mr. Ebo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, distinguished members of the Security Council, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am providing this briefing on behalf of the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs, Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, who is currently out of office. Almost 2 years have passed since the Russian Federation launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in violation of the UN Charter. That represents 23 months of death, destruction, and unbearable suffering and devastation. In line with my previous briefings on this subject, over the last months, the provision of military assistance and transfers of arms and ammunition to the Ukrainian armed forces have continued. According to publicly available information, these transfers have included heavy conventional weapons such as battle tanks, armored combat vehicles, combat aircraft, helicopters, large caliber artillery systems, missile systems, and uncrewed combat aerial vehicles, as well as remotely operated munitions, small arms and light weapons, and their ammunition. In addition, there have been reports of states transferring or planning to transfer weapons such as uncrewed aerial vehicles, ballistic missiles, and ammunition to the Russian armed forces.
Mr. Ebo then brings up the alarming amount of weapons transfers, large weapon transfers to both Ukraine and to Russia. And the concern is that a lot of times these weapons can find themselves into the hands of other actors, terrorist groups, and because of course the record keeping is not the best in this situation, these types of situations, and so they'll lose track. Maybe a military personnel on one side secretly sells it to somebody else, and so these weapons transfers, they must be in line with applicable and current legal conventions, talking about how records must be kept so that they can prevent the transfer to the terrorist groups. And Mr. Ibo is actually very concerned with the transfer of cluster munitions, and because these weapons are extremely dangerous.
Reports related to the transfer and use of cluster munitions throughout the conflict are very concerning. The Secretary General has repeatedly called for an immediate end to the use of cluster munitions. In line with this long-standing position, these weapons must be rendered inoperable and consigned to history.
Next up is the Russian Federation's representative, Sergei Lavrov. He puts the entire council on notice that the reason why this conflict has not ended is the continued support from the West with their weapons transfers and other support, and that it must be known that weapons are going into the black market and that anyone can buy it on the internet in exchange for cryptocurrency. He also gives a reason as to why the conflict started.
I now give the floor to members of the Council, beginning with His Excellency Mr. Sergei Lavrov, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for giving me the floor. Today, we are once again discussing the situation in Ukraine in the context of continued Western weapons supplies into the country. Today, the absolute majority of unbiased experts see very clearly that the key factor which impedes ways towards a peaceful settlement of the Ukrainian crisis is a continued support on the part of the West to the regime in Kiev. And despite the fact that it is obviously in agony and it is incapable of attaining the goal set to itself, namely to inflict strategic defeat on Russia, or, as is being said recently, to at least weaken my country. Russia began the special military operation in February 2022, and it wasn't against Ukraine, and it wasn't against the Ukrainian people. We are still linked by brotherly ties with them, and it's not a coincidence that after 2014, in Russia, almost 7 million Ukrainians found salvage there. We had to start the military operation against an overzealous criminal regime acting with impunity, who decided, despite many years-long efforts, regime which decided not to reject war against their own citizens in the south and southeast of Ukraine, or to reject the policy of total discrimination of Russian-speaking Ukrainians who are still a majority in that country. And the Zelensky regime did this not only in violation of the Minsk agreements approved by the Security Council, but also in violation of elementary principles of civilized society and how it should be functioning, and whilst grossly violating foundational human rights, including the rights of national minorities, which are enshrined in the Ukrainian constitution.
Okay, now we'll briefly hear from two other representatives from the Security Council. One, a non-permanent member, Malta, and a permanent member, China. Next up is Malta, and the representative starts by criticizing Russia's attacks on Ukraine, and in addition mentions that weapons from the DPRK are being sent to Russia in violation of existing Security Council resolutions.
I thank Mr. Lavrov for his declaration, and I now give the floor to the representative of Malta.
President, I also thank High Representative Ebo for his informative briefing. Nearly 2 years ago, the Russian Federation, during its presidency of the Security Council, decided to violate fundamental principles of international law by launching a fully fledged war of aggression against its sovereign neighbor, acting thus in complete opposition with its duty to maintain international peace and security. the transfer of ballistic missiles, along with any other arms and related material from the DPRK and Iran to Russia, violates multiple United Nations Security Council resolutions, undermines the global non-proliferation regime, and inflicts further suffering to the Ukrainian people. To conclude, President, Malta reiterates that Ukraine has the inherent right to defend itself from the Russian aggression, as enshrined in Article 51 of the UN Charter. It has the right to protect its citizens, its borders, its sovereignty, and its territorial integrity.
Strong words from Malta. Obviously, they're in favor of halting these hostilities immediately. Next up is China. They also want hostilities to stop, but at the same time, they kind of cryptically reveal Russia's probable true reason for invading, and that's Ukraine's inclusion into NATO. They say that Russia had to invade in order to prevent an expansion of an enemy military bloc.
Now give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I thank Mr. Ebo for his briefing earlier and welcome the presence of Mr. Lavrov, representative of the Russian Federation and the permanent representative of Ukraine at this meeting, ending the Ukraine crisis, halting the hostilities and restoring peace is felt more urgently than ever. All parties should work harder to that end. No country may attempt to secure itself at the expense of another country's security, nor can regional security be guaranteed by way of muscling up or even expanding a military bloc. The consequences of NATO's eastward expansion indicate that seeking so-called absolute security at the expense of other countries' security will only widen the security deficit and trust deficit. It will do nothing to make our world more peaceful and stable. In this regard, NATO would do well to learn its lesson. Russia and Ukraine are neighbors that cannot move away from each other even if they wanted to. Their respective legitimate security concerns should be taken seriously by each other. The ultimate way out of the conundrum lies in an effort on the part of both countries and other parties concerned to build a balanced, effective and sustainable security architecture guided by the vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative and sustainable security.
And after China spoke, the meeting then heard from the other members of the Security Council, and it ended without any action item. The war continues. The Security Council remains seized of the situation. Hopefully the United Nations can help resolve this matter, and we remain seized of the matter.